Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show for Nebraska. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today to preview Saturday's matchup and more will be Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. Before that, let's start as we always do with my view from Section 17 and a few cuts from Matt Rule's Monday presser. Last week was fun to watch. Sharon and staff turned Bryce and the offense loose, and the results were impressive. They should have been against an undermanned rebuilding program like Central. So it answered a few questions about Team 146. We now see this will not be a smash-mouth, run-it-down-your-throat offense. It might be that eventually, but with the offensive line struggles, it's not now. So we're going to see Chip use Bryce's arm and legs to drive this offense. When you have a talent like this, it's a smart decision and makes the offense very hard to game plan for and slow down. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be mistakes. With a freshman quarterback, even a Bryce Underwood, we're going to see some of those boneheaded plays every once in a while. I mean, that's okay. We're also going to see incredible plays more often, like we saw last week. This week is another trip to one of college football's most difficult venues. Nebraska is off to a 3-0 start, and they have a future NFL quarterback running their offense. They are balanced and look to be much improved from last year. Their defense is the question. The secondary is as good as we'll see this year, but the D-line and the backers are new. And according to Huskers radio guy Kyle Crooks, they are also undersized for a Big Ten front. They are athletic, but not huge. So between the noise and dealing with a hungry Nebraska team looking for a signature win, this is going to take a big effort on both sides of the ball from Michigan. Are we up to it? We'll find out at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. At his Monday presser, Matt Rule was asked how this Michigan team compares to the last one he coached against.
I wouldn't spend a lot of time comparing. They were different, you know what I mean? But they still have the same, the core philosophies. I mean, like I said, they are, 15th in rush offense and they're 25th in rush defense, right? Like they're going to have elite play up front on both sides of the ball. And so the quarterback brought the dynamic element of, he was their leading rusher in the last game. That hadn't really happened the first two games. More of a pocket player in this last game. It was, get out and utilize his legs and his skill set. So that obviously adds another element to it. They're based on the same core philosophy, philosophy of, they're going to control the lines of scrimmage, and they've done that, in so far this year.
One of the beat writers asked if the Michigan offensive line was similar to what he saw 2 years ago at Nebraska.
I can't compare them to the past, because I don't remember anything really from. I'd have to study it, but they're an outstanding offensive line. They're big, they're powerful, they're athletic. They run all the runs, Anytime your head coach is an offensive line coach, you probably put a lot of stock in that. So, this is an excellent top 25 football team, They're 2-1 because they played another top 10 football team and they had a battle. It'll be an unbelievable challenge. It'll be a great challenge.
My guest today says maybe playing a tough road game at Oklahoma will help Bryce and the team be better prepared for Lincoln. Either way, this is a season barometer game for both teams. Up next with his thoughts on Saturday and much more is Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. Joining us on our game day segment this week as we get ready for another big road test in Lincoln is Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. Good to have you back with us, Clayton.
Great to be here, especially on a big week. I'm excited.
Yeah, it is a big one. I guess everyone, though, is still talking about that offensive performance against Central last Saturday. And, I mean, it should be that easy every week, right? But, it won't be. In all the years I've been around Michigan football, that has to be the biggest 360 I've ever seen as far as game planning goes from week to week. I guess you have to credit Sharon Moore for realizing it was time to let it rip.
That might have been one of the most unique weeks in Michigan football history when you think of it.
Yeah.
First of all, if you go from Saturday to Saturday, right, you had a game against Oklahoma. You'd only had one of those ever, the 1976 Orange Bowl. And it's a devastating loss on the road at an SEC opponent. It's the first time they ever played a true road game at an SEC opponent. And then the next week, your head coach is around. He's helping game plan. Like you said, they made some major changes to, not just a game plan, but their offensive approach is seemingly for the rest of the season, with opening it up for Bryce Underwood through the air with his legs. So you have all that go on. Sharon Moore spent every individual period of practice with the offensive line because they didn't play very well against Oklahoma, and that's his forte. And then he can't be with the team starting at 12:01 a.m. on Saturday. They go out there with Biff Poggi, a 66-year-old former hedge fund manager who drives a $500,000 Rolls Royce and usually wears cutoff T-shirts and shorts when he coaches games, but was mandated to wear sleeves and pants and said he felt like he was wrapped like a mummy. And then they go out there, Mike, and the first play of the game is a deep pass from Bryce Underwood, and it was almost intercepted, but I think they sent a message with that play. One, they wanted to hit on it, but two, they wanted to say, hey, we're here, and we're going to let this kid cook. We're going to let Bryce cook, and he's, this is his offense. He's one of our best players. We have to play to our strengths, and one of their strengths is that they have a dynamic athlete with a great arm and is ahead of the game in terms of being a freshman mentally, and they have to play to him. What is not their strength is probably the offensive line, running the ball against a great defensive front like Oklahoma, all these different things. So they realized, and credit to them, like you said, to Sharon Moore, the rest of the staff, for realizing all that. But some of that is in jest there, but also just looking back on it, it was a crazy, crazy week, and it ended with a 60-point win, which is just amazing.
Yeah, and as you said, having Bryce Underwood is, of course, the main reason you would and can open up the offense. The other reason you need to do that is the offensive line play, and I mean, God bless them all. It's just not a power run group as we've seen the last, not last year, but the 3 and 4 years previous to that under Jim Harbaugh. A lot of zone blocking I noticed a lot last Saturday against Central Michigan, and the guys looked a lot more comfortable doing that, didn't they?
They did, and I thought that finally, and there is only the third game, so I guess I shouldn't say finally, but, 3 weeks in, it was the first time you really saw them at the line of scrimmage with the push up front, where you were getting that initial surge of, 1, 2, 3 yards, and then, in those zone plays, then you're opening up the holes that way. You're getting to the second level, and they were doing that without two of their starters, Giovanni El-Hadi at left guard, Brady Norton at right guard, Jake Guanera, the redshirt freshman, making his first career start on the right side and looking really good. And I think having talked to Grant Newsome this week in his press conference, Jake Guanera did enough for them to think about who's going to be the starter. So that was an encouraging sign, given that they already had to go with a different offensive line combination. They were already seeing that, Andrew Babalola went down in the preseason. You had your two guards go down. One of them against Oklahoma, the other one in practice last week, and you had other guys step in and play pretty well. And Mike, 4 runs of 10-plus yards in the first 2 games. 3 of them were 50-plus yarders by Justice Haynes. And, the big issue was, where are the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-yard gains that we're accustomed to seeing from Michigan football? And those showed up, and not just 5, 6, 7, 8. They had 17 of 10-plus yards, a lot of 10, a lot of 11, and Central Michigan had only allowed 4 of those runs of 10-plus yards in their first 2 games. So it's not like everybody was running all over them. One of their strengths actually coming in was the run defense. So that's a encouraging sign for Michigan. Now they have to go do it against a better team. But Nebraska has some warts up front, too. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But very good signs there, and they're getting healthier as well.
Yeah, and the other thing that was clear watching on Saturday is that Chip Lindsey knows how to call a football game. His play calling was just outstanding and very timely, wasn't it?
It was. And I think that we saw it in the first game against New Mexico. I think maybe against Oklahoma, they overestimated the amount of success they would have on the ground. So they went a little more conservative, figuring they would lean on that. And they've kind of admitted that in some different ways since then. But then he opens it back up against Central Michigan. And he was in his bag, so to speak. Some of the quick throws, the end around to Andrew Marsh, the true freshman wide receiver who scored his first career touchdown. Like you mentioned, going to more some of those zone blocking plays in the run game. Justice Haynes plays well. He has 100 yards for the third straight game. And then a couple design runs for Bryce Underwood, but a lot of downfield passes, a lot of really good throws, and then his ability to run when nothing's there, or even when, hey, I could throw it into this tight window. I have a guy somewhat open. I can throw him open. I know I can make that throw, but I also see green grass in front of me. And Justice Haynes talks about it a lot. Run to green grass. Bryce Underwood did that last weekend, and he himself had 6 of those 17 runs of 10-plus yards. So, now you're looking at an offense that looks really tough to stop. When you watched them on Saturday night, September 6th in Norman, it didn't look like a very dangerous offense. Again, it was Central Michigan, but if you're Nebraska, you have a heck of a lot more to think about when you watch what Michigan did against CMU.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do this because, for one reason, you have Bryce Underwood. And I know my pet peeve with this style of offense has always been you're simplifying what your offensive line does, a lot of zone blocking, and then you're playing to your quarterback and your skill players, which are your strength. I mean, because you're not going to have 5 NFL linemen up front every year. It's just a fact. But going back to what I said at the top of the show, Clayton, what impresses me the most about Saturday, and hopefully moving forward, is that after 2 games, Sharon and staff are basically saying, okay, we're going to do what we do best now, which is not what we're used to seeing at Michigan. And, that took big cojones just after 2 games to make a 360 like that, didn't it?
Yeah, and, that's the thing, right? No one wanted to go down to Oklahoma and lose that game. And, the way they played it was kind of a game plan, as far as how the run game was not working and they really didn't pass protect very well. It was kind of a game plan to stay in the game, not necessarily win it, especially when you have that quarterback on the other side.
Yeah.
John Mateer, who's now the Heisman frontrunner. But for them to pivot that quickly and understand that their best talent is really number 22 in the backfield, Justice Haynes. So you're not going to go away from running him. But, when teams are stacking the box and they think that that's all you have to go to who might be your next best option, or, at some point he'll be better, Bryce Underwood. And so, and that's using all of Bryce Underwood's skills, his running ability, his throwing ability. So I thought those were really important adjustments for them. And it's funny, Biff Poggi said it on Monday night on his radio show that they don't want, or at least he doesn't want anyone to refer to him as a freshman anymore, that he feels like he's taking his steps into being a seasoned player. And it's amazing you can say that about a guy who turned 18 years old a month ago, but that's just how advanced Bryce Underwood is. So that gives you a heck of a shot going into the rest of the season.
Well, you would hope so. Now, the defense did what we expected them to do Saturday, throttled CMU. The most enjoyable element of watching the D was what Wink did with Jayshawn Barham on the edge. I mean, he looks more terrifying coming off the edge than he does a linebacker, doesn't he?
Well, there's no question. And here's a couple things about that. One, what stood out to me is, remember we just talked about the first play of the game on offense where they go deep and they kind of send a message. The first play of the game on defense, Jayshawn Barham comes through and just throws Joe Labus, the Central Michigan quarterback, down like a rag doll. And, it set the tone for what that was going to be. I think he played 27 snaps. All of them were on the line of scrimmage at defensive end, edge rusher, whatever you want to call it. And all of them, I couldn't keep my eyes off of number one because he was so explosive. He was so quick off the football. That is his position, in my opinion. And I'm sure we'll see him off ball at, middle linebacker at some point the rest of the year and maybe even Saturday. We'll see what the plan is going forward. Sure sounds like they're going to play him more at edge, though. but that's really dangerous. And when I look at this defense overall, what were they kind of missing in the first couple games? It was probably that star player, the difference maker, the person who, as Biff Poggi talked about the other day, the other team has to shift their protections over towards him because he's that good, and then you can free up some other players. Like, they didn't maybe have that gravity yet with the one guy that opponents had to be weary of. And I think Jayshawn Barham at this position is that guy. And again, Nebraska has a lot to think about when they look at Michigan's offense now after the way they played last week, but they also have a lot to think about when they're scouting Michigan's defense and where the heck is number one going to be.
Yeah, and I know Wink said we won't see that all the time, but I got to think one of the reasons Wink can play with this is that Cole Sullivan can step in for Barham, and that kid looks more and more like a player, doesn't he?
I'm a big Cole Sullivan fan, and he has just impressed me maybe even more than I thought he was going to this year. When you think of the first game where he has an interception and a sack on fourth down, he ended back-to-back drives himself. I thought he looked pretty good, and maybe even better than Jimmy Rolder in the Oklahoma game when he got his opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And then last week, making plays again and even lining up at edge rusher himself. I think right now he looked a little small up there and more suited for a traditional linebacker role, but he's got a lot of potential down the road too with their ability to move him around. So I'm excited, and I think that you're totally right. The reason why they were able to move Jayshawn Barham up is because, again, just like on offense, on defense, what are the strengths? One of them's depth and talent at linebacker. So we can move this dynamic athlete, Jayshawn Barham, up to the line of scrimmage because we have other guys who are capable and really probably deserving of playing time on the second level.
Oh, absolutely. It works well for everyone. Now, I know this is nitpicking after a blowout, but when you watch games and I look at them with an idea of what's coming next, the secondary play still worries me somewhat. I mean, even against Central, it looked like a fire drill at times when they were getting in their sets on defense. So they really need a guy like Rod Moore back there to get them where they're supposed to be, don't they? I'm
fascinated to see what Rod Moore is when he returns.
Yeah.
He hasn't played in a game since the national championship game over 600 days ago. And, he still looks like he's not necessarily running without any sort of, being impeded by the injury. He does look, when you watch him in warmups, like he's not struggling, but it's just a little bit different, right? He's going to have to round into form. And really, he didn't look like himself early on a couple of years ago when he was coming off of a different knee injury in 2023. And then by the end of the year, he was good to go. So, of course, we all know what he did at the end of the year, especially in the last regular season game in the Rose Bowl. But so it might take a little bit of time when he does get back. But Lamar Morgan, Michigan's defensive backs coach, was talking about it this week, how he just is going to be a calming presence for the secondary. He's going to help with communication, making sure guys are in the right spots and, not having those little errors in coverage that could burn you. And this weekend, I don't know how much he'll play. I think he'll probably will get out there some. Is it going to be 8 snaps? Will it be 12 snaps? Will it be on rundowns? Will it be on passing downs? We'll see. But, this is a really good Nebraska passing attack with Dylan Raiola at quarterback. And I think really good receivers that they got, 2 of them out of the transfer portal. So, yeah, he could definitely help there. But the secondary's got to be better. They're a little thin on depth. So he would definitely help in a lot of ways. But more than anything, I think getting these guys more experience and making sure that they can handle the passing teams like this will be important.
For me, really not too many worries with the D, as I said, other than some nitpicking in the secondary. But the punt return game, that's a worry for me. I mean, I love Samaj Morgan, but I would say either he cleans it up or that audition is over. That has got to be fixed very soon, doesn't it?
Well, that audition has been going on a while, and there have been some issues for a while with him back there. And, and then even the time in the last game where he got ran into by his own guy, and you're thinking, okay, now that picture's in my head, like anything and everything could go wrong. And that's part of special teams, right? Like I remember saying before the opener against New Mexico, when they said that Andrew Marsh was going to be the kick returner, I said, this is a great opportunity for a true freshman to get the football in his hands, to be back there, to get some playing time and build a little bit of confidence. We saw how Jordan Marshall returned kicks last year And then, he broke off a couple long ones. And then when he was, ready to go for the bowl game and it was his opportunity, that probably helped him because he had some experience. And then he goes out and fumbles, against New Mexico, Andrew Marsh, that is.
Yeah.
And then you're thinking, okay, it's, screwing things up is really the issue on special teams. Doing nothing, is much better than screwing it up. And then any positive return you can get would be pretty good. But it feels like so far in the punt return game, going back to your original question, they've either gotten nothing out of it, like a fair catch, or, the ball is bouncing and he kind of grabs it on a hop and maybe saves a few yards, those invisible yards. Or he screws it up where, he had the muff and they were able to recover the one in the opener, but they've got to clean that up. And there have been some special teams issues this year. And I'm not even counting Dominic Zapata in that because I think he'll be fine. He has missed 2 kicks, but yeah, they got to figure out the special teams. They got to make sure when you go on the road, that's not what loses you the game.
Yeah, that is sure. And I'm not worried about Dominic Zapata either. A little surprised at the first 2 misses, but I'm sure he's money long term, so not to worry. As much as I like to say, though, everything is fixed now and we're going to roll into Lincoln and, put on another show, we know this week is a different challenge and the environment alone is a challenge. Do you think playing that night game at Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago in a very similar environment is going to benefit Bryce and the team? There's
no question. I mean, from offensive line communication to, just the fact that you have kind of heard that, like, it is weird and almost disconcerting when you go to these road games and something good happens for the other team and everyone's cheering and, like, it just feels like the momentum can really mount and can almost be like an avalanche. And we kind of saw that against Oklahoma where it just felt like Michigan was just not quite comfortable a lot of the game, but having gone through that physically with their bodies, like hearing the noise and understanding that it's kind of us against the world and all this, I think will benefit them. And Bryce Underwood, in all honesty, I thought he came out in that Oklahoma game and looked pretty poised and comfortable. He started 5 of 9 with 76 yards, made a couple nice throws, like the first one to Samaj, made another one on the move, I think, to Donovan McCulley on the sideline. Like, there were some plays he made where he looked comfortable. And then as the game went on, things kind of went awry. But now that he's gone through a full 60 minutes of that, I think he'll be a little bit more ready. This isn't a night game. Nebraska is a heck of an environment, though. So, like you said, it will be pretty similar. But I think, the fact that they not only went against that environment, but played that level of competition, especially the offense. That level of resistance you were getting is important too. And Nebraska played Cincinnati, and that was a tight game. They haven't seen anyone like Oklahoma or like a Michigan. So Michigan's going to be a little bit more ready in terms of just having been in that type of fight so far.
Well, one thing that we do know for certain is we're going to see probably a future NFL quarterback under center for Nebraska in Dylan Raiola. The kid has, I think, around an 80% completion rate through 3 games. Yes, the first 2 games were pretty soft, but he's a game changer, just plain and simple, isn't he?
Yeah, it's, so I just watched the Houston Christian game the other night and watched a lot of the Cincinnati game live a few weeks ago when it happened, but I'm going to go back and watch some of that again. But the first thing that stands out, and again, this is Houston Christian. They were playing, I didn't even know that team existed, but he gets up to the line, and he's scanning the field. He's looking at what the defense is in. He maybe makes a check at the line. And then once the ball is snapped, he knows exactly where to go with the ball. He knows the system in and out. It is apparent that is the case. And so that is, something that Michigan is going to have to counter. And Wink Martindale is probably pretty excited to go against a guy that maybe thinks he knows where the ball is going to have to go. He thinks he knows what the defense is in. Because as we know, he's kind of a master of disguising all that.
Yeah.
And but man, he throws a really good football. He's big, he's tall, he can see over the line. And like I said, I think the receivers are really good. They got Ja'Cory Barney, who had a really good freshman year for Nebraska last year, but then the 2 transfers, Neziah Hunter from Cal and then Dane Key, who's big and athletic, who came and had a huge year last year from Kentucky. Very, very good. And the thing about Raiola so far, though, is, and that Michigan's going to have to do, get some pressure on him. Of course, every week you could say that, but he hasn't been touched. He has been sacked 3 times, but he's hardly been hit this year. Get in his face, make him uncomfortable, and it can look like a totally different game. When you think of, the difference between Michigan's offense against New Mexico and Michigan's offense against Oklahoma, it was night and day because they were playing a great team, great defense first and foremost. I know they were on the road and that played a factor, but like it's not going to look as comfortable as it has for Nebraska so far going against Michigan. So if Jayshon Barham and those guys can get after them, that would be a great start for, them potentially keeping them, I'd say 17, 21 points, something like that, that in that range, then I think you have a shot to win this game.
Yeah, what I think is different, though, Clayton, about Nebraska this year is they are not a one-trick pony. They can run the ball. They have so far. I mean, Biff mentioned in his presser that Emmett Johnson is a big-time back, gets a lot of yards after contact. I mean, they're not Oklahoma, but this will be a good test for Wink's defense, won't it?
Yeah, their run game, I think he's a solid back. I don't think he's, and I talked to Sean Callahan, who covers Nebraska for our On3 site, Husker Online, and he's kind of the king of Nebraska over there in the media. And he said that Emmett Johnson, he thinks is okay. We'll see against different competition. It'll be interesting to see in short yardage at the goal line. Can Michigan come up with some stops, save themselves 4 points, and force a field goal as opposed to allowing a touchdown, or getting off the field on 4th and 1, or getting off the field on 3rd and 2, those sorts of things. So, and Michigan's got some big bodies up there. So this Nebraska O-line, which is kind of revamped as well, a couple guys that were out for the season last year, Rocco Spindler, the Notre Dame transfer at right guard, they're going to be challenged more than they have all year. And, so I think Michigan's got to stand up in those big moments against the run, or getting to Raiola on 3rd and 7 or something like that. Those big downs are going to be what decides, how this game goes on that side of the football.
Well, Nebraska lost a lot of talent on the D-line last year, and their radio guy, Kyle Crooks, told me they're really an undersized group this year. Very athletic, but they're undersized. The secondary, on the other hand, is very, very good. Maybe one of the best secondaries we'll see all year. So Michigan should have some success running the ball against these guys, and we better, because the secondary, again, is very, very good. To me, that's the key matchup in this game, Clayton. Michigan's offense against that Nebraska defense. It's really going to be fascinating to watch, isn't it?
It will be. And how can Michigan fare up front on the offensive line against a defensive line that really hasn't been all that good, right? I don't know where they're going to end up rating in the Big Ten, but it probably isn't top 8, 9, right? It might be in the bottom half. And how can, because we saw what happened in the struggles against Oklahoma, but that might be one of the better defensive lines in the country.
Oh, yeah.
And so Michigan's now not facing that, but again, tough environment on the road, still a good team with a lot of talent and a good secondary, like you mentioned. So interested to see the battle up front, interested to see what kind of separation Michigan's receivers can create. Is this going to be a Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen game? Can Donovan McCulley, stretch things out down the field? I think they got to give him a chance 1 or 2 times a game on some deep passes, because he can go up and get the football. His catch against Oklahoma where he pinned it against the defender's back kind of reminded me of when you would just, and they didn't do it enough, but when they would go up top for Nico Collins and he would make all those 50-50 balls look like 80-20 or 90-10. It'll be really interesting. Again, Nebraska hasn't really been tested all that much. And you mentioned the run game. When you look back at the Cincinnati game against Nebraska, Brendan Sorsby, the Indiana transfer quarterback, averaged, I think, 7.6 yards per carry. He was the leading rusher for Cincinnati. So there could be some opportunities for Bryce Underwood to run as well.
Yeah. And Nebraska, as a defensive unit, gave up over 200 yards rushing to Cincinnati last Saturday. Only gave up 69 passing. So to me, that's the matchup that's going to turn the game. Anyway, final question before we let you get away, Clayton. Not lost in all of this is the fact Sharon wasn't at practice this week, serving the last of his suspension. And of course, he's not going to be there Saturday. Big game for Biff and the staff. Before the season, I think a lot of us had this as a toss-up game. I still do. But what are your vibes heading into Saturday?
Yeah, I have it as a toss-up too. And I think that it's interesting because we saw what they did with Biff Poggi as the head coach last week, and they didn't skip a beat. Like, it looked, honestly, it was their best performance right out of 3 games, but it looked like Michigan football. Like, if you didn't look down at who was the head coach or they didn't show him on the TV, like, you wouldn't have known that anything was different because of the way Michigan played. But Sharon Moore was there all week, and he was pushing the offensive line, and he was switching up their approach on offense, and they were making the moves they did on defense. And not that the coordinators and the assistant coaches and Biff Poggi aren't capable of doing those things, and not that Sharon Moore didn't get ahead on this game plan, because, he said he did. But it's just going to be interesting to see what they look like without him having been around all week. And no one can really predict how that will look, because we haven't seen it before. When Jim Harbaugh was suspended, he wasn't. He was around during the week, and then he just wasn't there on game day. And so it was really still his team. And so I'll be interested to see how they look. I think that, really, I don't hate how Michigan matches up with this game, because it's a small sample size for both teams, so it's always hard to judge this early in the year exactly what they are. But what are the things that went wrong for Michigan against Oklahoma? One, it was, that D-line and Brent Venables, one of the best defensive coordinators of all time, really got after them and really disrupted them and got them out of their rhythm. And they didn't trust Bryce Underwood as much, and they didn't really open things up. On the other side of the ball, what really hurt Michigan, the big plays down the field, I think of the one in the end zone when John Mateer was hit really hard by Ernest Hausman, but got the ball out for like a 30 or 40-yard gain. Unbelievable play. The time when Brandon Hillman came through and nearly had a sack on John Mateer, he scrambles out. He finds Sategna, the wide receiver, for, I think, 38, 39-yard gain. Just backbreaking. And then all the quarterback runs where, you kind of don't know how to play it, because he would just figure out where the defenders are. I mean, unbelievable how he moves in space and finds the open areas, and his legs really hurt them. I don't know that Nebraska has any of that. They pose different challenges, but the things Michigan struggled against, the quarterback run, the exotic looks that Brent Venables brings, the defensive tackles that really wrecked that game on the interior, I don't think Nebraska has that. Now, they have different things like Dylan Raiola, who can air it out. He's extremely smart. He's really efficient. So it'll be different challenges, but I don't think that the Oklahoma loss means that Michigan can't go in and win this game, or that they can't perform better than they did. So I think, I know you didn't ask for a prediction, but I think Michigan's going to win a fairly close game, a hard-fought game on the road. But it's gonna be a lot of fun.
I like your prediction, by the way. So I'm hoping that's what happens too. One more thing though, Clayton, I was just thinking of this. I know I said last question. Biff Poggi. I mean, he was around for years under Harbaugh. We knew he was there, but we never really heard from him. Never saw much of him. But I was watching him on the sidelines last Saturday, and I thought, he looked like he should be there. He looked very comfortable. And then his pressers, I have to say, especially this past Monday, he went, I think, for 40 minutes, which was very unusual. But he's very forthcoming, very relaxed. He's just an interesting guy, isn't he?
I'm so fascinated by Biff. And I have been for a long time, when he came here the first time. And, I know you saw it, but when he was talking about, just how he ended up at Michigan in the first place. He was a head coach. Jim Harbaugh calls him up one night, and his son Henry was on the team at the time, and just said, hey, why don't you join the staff, And then they meet, love ever after, as Biff put it, decides to go back. He founded the football program at St. Francis Academy that turns into a powerhouse. Yeah. And they produced Jay Sean Barham and Derek Moore and Blake Corum and Nikai Hill-Green and Yabi Oki and, players that went elsewhere as well, Alabama, all sorts of schools. So he did all that, comes back to Michigan 2 different times, right? He was at Charlotte, the cutoff T-shirts that went viral when he was the head coach there, and all the interviews and the sound bites. And then it was funny, he was talking about how, when he wasn't very happy about becoming the interim head coach, because he's not happy that Sharon Moore's not able to be there, but he's gladly, willing to kind of carry the torch for a couple of weeks. And he said when he got into the tunnel, he was a little bit kind of like, okay, I got to go do this, and this is going to be weird, and I'm wearing sleeves, and I'm doing all this. And then he said once he walked down the tunnel, he realized, hey, I've done this 300 sometimes. I'm ready to go. And like you said, he did look comfortable. He comes up to the press conference, and he gave an unbelievable press conference after the game. He gave an awesome one on Monday as well. Yeah. There couldn't be a more perfect individual to take on this role. Like, he's not the best head coach of all time, but the players love him. He's got great relationships with the staff. He allows, with his experience, the coordinators and the assistant coaches to just stay in their roles, do what you do. I'm sure they're picking up the slack a little bit, without Sharon Moore there. But man, when Sharon Moore brought him back, starting, I think he rejoined the program in January. That was just a big get, because he allows them to kind of, handle this situation, which is not a great situation, but handle this situation as best as any program possibly could. And so I think it's just awesome to see what kind of guy he is. And what a life he's led. It's fascinating. I just love learning more and more about Biff Poggi, the stories he's telling. Day by day, you're learning more and more.
Yeah, and I think he'll do just fine Saturday. I'm looking forward to see how he is on the sidelines. But it's a huge game, a barometer game for both programs. I mean, Nebraska's putting a lot on this because they need to get over the hump. They need a signature win, and Michigan just wants to show that, hey, last week was just the beginning. So it is going to be a fascinating game to watch. Here with us today to preview the game and talk about what we've seen for Michigan so far in the first 3 games has been Clayton Sayfie from the Wolverine ON3. As always, Clayton, a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to getting you back here very soon.
Well, it's one of my favorite things to do, so I appreciate you having me, and hopefully a good weekend.
On Quick Hits today, nothing new on the injury front. Rod Moore will be eased back into the lineup. Gio El-Hadi is out for the next few weeks, but Brady Norton is a go for Lincoln. Here are some game day notes of interest. Michigan leads the all-time series against Nebraska with a record of 6-4. Nebraska won the first meeting 25-13 on September 29th of 1962 in Ann Arbor. 2 years ago in Lincoln, Michigan won handily 45-7. Headman Matt Rule is in his 3rd season. He sports a 12-13 record in Lincoln and is 59-56 overall in 10 years as a head coach. Last year, the Huskers were 7-6 overall, 3-6 in Big Ten play. They finished the season with a victory in the Pinstripe Bowl, beating Boston College 20-15. They are 3-0 heading into Saturday's game. Saturday's contest will be a national game on CBS. Kickoff is scheduled for just after 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The weatherman says we're in for another pretty good football day. Cloudy skies with temps in the mid-70s. There is a slight chance of rain. So here we go. Another tough road environment against a team itching to prove it's ready to beat the big boys in the Big Ten. They've looked good so far, but like Michigan, no one is really sure how good they are. That's what makes Saturday's game so fascinating. Both teams have a lot to prove, and after Saturday, we'll know a lot more about both of them. Next week, we have a bye, so we'll be back on Thursday to break down the Nebraska game and talk about where Team 146 stands after 4 games. So make sure you join us. A reminder to follow us on X and leave a comment or review wherever you get your podcasts from. That does it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Nebraska. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!